All right. How's everybody doing tonight? Tonight is our Thursday night book review, part 6. Just give it a second to warm up for everybody to jump in, and then we'll get started. All right. So, for everybody that's joining us for the first time, I am Nick Belisi. I wrote The Souls of Paradise, and I also wrote Paradise Reborn. And Thursday is what we've been doing for the last couple sessions, because this is part 6. We've been going through a couple chapters, and we've been talking about little Easter eggs and stuff like that found within the book to give you guys like a better insight as to how I came up with the ideas and, how, the story progressed and stuff like that. So last week, we wound up doing chapters 8, 9, and 10. This week, we're going to be doing chapters 11, 12, and 13. Then, next Thursday, we'll continue on with another 3 chapters, and then so on and so forth till we get to the last 2 chapters. So I think we have about 2 more weeks, of this before we finish with the first book. So to get us started tonight, we are on chapter 11, like I said before. The chapter is called Self-Medication. All right. Basically, the premise of what happens in that chapter is Stella comes home and sees her dad drinking, and she asks him about the restraining order that she found out about earlier between her sister and her sister's ex-boyfriend. And her dad becomes, very agitated with her, and, that prompts Stella to, retreat into her room. She then smokes a joint, and she starts to clean, and then she starts reminiscing on past things. Now, the title of it, Self-Medication, I came up with that because that's what I used to call my drinking back in the day when I was doing that. I would say I was self-medicating and stuff. So that's where that chapter title came from. Now, to bring us to, let's see, page 98, there's a little insert that I wanted to read from there. All right. So on page 98, basically what Stella's talking about is she's having a conversation with her dad, and then she begins to describe, some things about him during that conversation. Because when she walks in the kitchen, she sees him, just starting his night out, his nightly routine where he would start drinking. So, as she walks into the house, she hears, the soda bottle freshly opened. So she goes, okay, so Dad's going to be mixing drinks right now, but I caught him in the beginning, so maybe we could get time to, ask him about stuff. So as she's talking to him and stuff like that, while things are good, before she brings up the question about the restraining order, basically she says, "This is the side of my father that I like to see. Before the alcohol and before Cecile's death, my father was a very sweet and pleasant person to be around. He knew what the alcohol did to him, but I guess the pain of living sober outweighed the mistakes he made when he was drunk. Dad began to drink long from his glass, nearly finishing his drink in one sitting. I had to hand it to him. He had no problem ever putting the alcohol in, he just had an issue with controlling himself once he started. He placed the glass back down and began to mix another one. I sat at the table watching him with such curiosity, as if I were watching him for the first time of ever seeing this. He was such a role model to me, and it was heartbreaking to see him start to wither away. I took a drink from my water, and that's when I began asking." So the reason why I wanted to read that part is because, that's how I felt and what people described back when I had some drinking issues and stuff like that. People would describe it was almost like watching an angel fall. That it was basically you had no problem drinking as much as you did, but, once you hit a certain point, that's when it became too much and you would just become, a sloppy mess. So, back in that time, what I was referring to is, I used to drink hard alcohol and stuff like that, and I would drink, quite a bit of either vodka or Jack Daniels. That was my later drink. And, everything would be going good, have a couple drinks, sing some karaoke, if you weren't doing anything, you'd just be hanging around the house. But, inevitably, it would turn into falling on the ground and being a sloppy mess, and it just got really bad. And eventually it was time to grow up and stop doing those things. But, that's what that nod from there came from. It was from my own drinking habits in the past. So, now, on page 101, I'm going to read a little bit, and after each paragraph, I'll break down why I was reading it. So, after Stella and her dad talk about the restraining order, she sees her dad starting to get, like I said before, really agitated, so she doesn't want to keep pushing it, but, she was trying to get some answers. So, what she says here is, he heard what I was saying, but he didn't respond. I figured at this point he needed space, so I should just give him some. I headed out of the kitchen and towards my room. I went up the stairs, stopping suddenly outside Cecile's room. I waited for a second and then continued into my own room. I could hear Dad crying from the kitchen as I slowly closed the door behind me. I laid on my bed and grabbed some chips in a crumpled bag from my nightstand and started to snack. I was about to eat my favorite snack of all time, salt and vinegar chips. Most people thought I was gross for liking them, but they had been my favorite snack since childhood. I remember Cecile telling me that they tasted like eating chemicals, but I never felt that way. So the reason why I wrote that is, my favorite snack always, like even growing up, was salt and vinegar chips. And it's funny too. It's funny, like when you see like your kids getting older and stuff like that, like mine especially. My kid is obsessed with them. If I put a bag in front of her, you can bet if I don't watch her, she's gonna eat the whole thing in like one sitting. Same thing with like pickles and things like that. And I put that in there to pay homage to that, but also the part where she says, Cecile used to tell me they taste like eating chemicals. That's what my little brother used to say all the time. It's like, I don't know how you eat that crap. It's like eating chemicals. Like, especially like if you get the certain brand, when you eat them, it burns like the ever-loving hell out of your tongue. He's just like, it's like putting chemicals in your mouth. It just like burns the hell out of it. How would you enjoy that? So I made a little nod with that. She continues on to say, after a few chips crunching away in my mouth, I figured now is a good time as any to clean my room. I sat up from my bed and started to clean up the clothes on my floor, and it only took about 2 minutes into this when I had completely lost all interest. I had to find a way to motivate myself, and then it hit me. A while back, Raul managed to give a few of us joints, and I never got around to smoking mine. I wasn't a pothead, but I would use it as the situation would arise. This would be a good time as any to finally enjoy it. In my head, I thought with everything going on, I deserved to clear my mind for a while. I went over to the top drawer of my dresser, dug underneath my underwear, and this is the place that I hid it, so I figured my dad would never be caught digging through my underwear drawer. So the reason why I put that in there is because when I used to work at a local restaurant around here, we actually had one of the cooks. His name was Fernando, and he would always sneak us stuff. You know what I mean? Like he would always be going into the walk-in or something like that, and he'd hide like a couple beers in there and stuff. And when nobody was looking, he'd be like, "Oh, you guys want a cerveza? Like, go out back." And we go out back and we drink and stuff. And it was kind of like laid back at that point. I mean, we were only, I think, like 16, but it was just that kind of atmosphere that we worked in where nobody really cared. So I put that in there as far as that way. And then I put in there about her smoking, because when I was younger, I used to smoke. I haven't since, I was probably like 20, I think, or 19. It was just not something I was interested in. Once I joined the military, I kind of just lost interest in doing that sort of thing. So, but I did put that in there because that's how I used to live my day-to-day, back in that point of time. It was always like, if you were doing something like tedious or something like that, and you got a little banged up, it made it more manageable. So it just made sense. The last part about chapter 11 that I wanted to read, it's going to be a little longer. Stella's talking about now, smoking and stuff like that. So she goes, I took a few more hits from the joint and dropped them into my water bottle where I hid all my old cigarettes. Slowly walking away from my window, I clicked on my ceiling fan and hid the paraphernalia. The feeling was so great and everything just seemed so vibrant. I walked over to my phone and clicked on some relaxing music. As the music played, I began to clean my room, throwing away days-old food and organizing my dirty clothes into the laundry basket. Piece by piece, the room really began to take shape. This wasn't such a hard task to accomplish, and I didn't understand why I couldn't keep up with it. When I came home, the motivation was always just so low, and I would tell myself to keep putting it off till tomorrow. With a few more minutes passing, the room was finally done, and it felt like such a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. There was this feeling of pride looking over my room and seeing how nice it looked clean. It metaphorically gave me hope that one day, with enough effort on my mind and lifestyle, it could be the same way. The key was just figuring out how. I couldn't be stoned all the time, so there has to be a way for people to go through life without all the obstacles I seem to encounter on a daily basis. In any regard, this wasn't the time to think about all that. This was my little vacation for the next few hours, and I was going to enjoy it to the fullest. So before I go on to the next bit, I felt the same way. I felt the same way that she was talking about. And, that was like my thing. Like, I don't know if anybody listens to Slightly Stupid, but, I would smoke and then I would throw on Slightly Stupid and, just kind of vibe and just be in it and, just chill out. And it just made tedious tasks worth doing. So she goes on to say, many people look down on you for smoking pot, saying that it makes you some sort of drug addict. I never knew why people felt like that, and I just assumed in my head that they probably were jealous because they couldn't do it themselves. I was no stranger to getting fucked up, as I would drink from time to time, and I had partaken in a few other things like acid and ecstasy. Ecstasy was the biggest thrill I think I've ever had in my entire life. The first time I did it was after Charlie and I split up. I went out to Pomodoro. I was just itching to take my mind off of things when I ran into some friends. And they were talking to some guy dressed very strangely, acting like he was from outer space or something. He had told me that his name was the Molly Man, and he had a gift for me. Now, before I go into that, a bunch of my friends and stuff like that, when we were growing up, we used to do those exact same things. And one night, when they were around Newton, they had picked up this hitchhiker for whatever reason, and he was calling himself the Molly Man. And he said that he had like a bag of treats, and he just wanted to ride, literally just across town. They came across town, and then he wound up giving them, the treats, which were, ecstasy and acid, just for giving them a ride. But the way he was joking and betraying himself, he's like, oh, like, I'm the Molly Man, like, I have my tricks, and he would, like, tell riddles and stuff. And it's a true story, like, it's screwed up as it is, but, I wanted to put that in there, because it was always something I thought was hilarious. So I just changed the story just a little bit in the book. And Stella goes on to say, he told me he could feel my sadness, and he had a way for me not to worry about it anymore. He opened up his hand and had 2 little pills resting in his palm. He could tell I was weary about taking them, and he told me that everything would be okay if I just let go and gave in. I didn't care about much anymore, so I just went with it. I placed it into my mouth and swallowed it with some beer that one of my friends had. After he saw it, I swallowed it and went on dancing around the fire pit singing songs to himself. I had asked my friends who he was or how they knew him, but no one seemed to know him or where he came from. Now I'm more worried than ever that I just took something from a stranger. I tried to sit down with the fire and focus on what was about to happen. But as I was staring into the fire for about 30 minutes when my vision started to become very hazy. It wasn't in an alarming way by any means, but more interesting. I could feel my body getting warm, and it felt like someone was massaging me all over. The feeling was completely orgasmic, and I started to wear this massive smile over my face. My friends could see it started to kick in, and I assured them that I was okay, and that I felt better than ever. Suddenly, the Molly Man was dancing around the fire, singing made sense to me. I remember spending the rest of the night dancing with him and thanking him for finally setting me free. It felt like an eternity, and I was so grateful for once in my life. The littlest things like fireflies in the night sky became so interesting. I started to value their existence, and I believed I had discovered the meaning of life. Dancing the night away, I felt limitless, and I noticed that it was way past my curfew, so I had to head home. But on the way home, I decided to take my shoes off and feel the grass beneath my bare feet. The feeling was complete bliss. Who knew something so simple could feel so great? This is exactly how I wanted to feel for the rest of my life. When I got home, I got straight into bed, realizing that I was laying beneath the comfiest sheets I'd ever felt, and drifted into sleep. Waking up the next morning, however, was not as pleasant as it is a screaming headache, and I could barely get out of bed. I think about that night often, and I wish I could do all over again, but I never saw the Molly Man again after that night. I looked over at the clock, and I knew I should catch up on some sleep. As I laid out in my bed, listening to the soft reggae music, just breathing in waves of relaxation. With my eyes closed, my arms tucked behind my head, I began to slowly drift into the music. I thought of the words in the songs and just imagined myself far away from here. I couldn't focus on, and it all just seemed so funny. With everything going on, it just felt right to be out of my mind. What would it matter anyway if I was high? I'm seeing things that people see on a bad acid trip while I'm completely sober. So, like I said, I put that in there because those were like one of the exciting things that I did in my life. I had messed around with stuff like that, and it almost like opens up like your third eye. People say that and stuff like that, but only someone who's taken those sort of things can attest to what I'm saying. But it makes you feel different. It opens up a whole new world for you that you would never see in a normal scenario. So I'm grateful that I had those experiences when I was younger. Obviously, it's been well over a decade, but you know what I mean? I'm grateful that I got to experience those types of things, and it was something that I wanted to throw in the book as a nod to, that kind of stuff. But it was a funny story, you know what I mean? So I wanted to put that in there. Now we're going on to chapter 12. Chapter 12 is called Torment. Basically what happens in this chapter is Stella hears her dad destroying things below her. She begins to fall on depression. Stella winds up self-harming because of it. The stress induces Stella into a dreamlike state, and a monster inhibits her fan. Stella, after defeating the monster or getting away from it, Stella sneaks out and heads to Lake Lucky. Then Stella begins to recall a time at the lake, then hears something, and she finds a carving that matches the locket that she had found earlier in the book. Stella takes her meds, and then, because she's starting to get anxiety, so she takes her medication, and she starts to hear more sounds, so she goes to investigate. Now, this one didn't have like a lot of Easter eggs in it, it's just like a little bit. So on page 108, let's see. So page 108, she's talking about, for example, she says, it's, again, if anyone is queasy about self-harm or anything like that, that's what I'm going to talk about right now, so feel free to jump off if that's going to bother you, but, just as a trigger warning. So she has borderline, for anyone who hasn't followed along with us, and if you know anything about borderline, self-harm is something that happens, unfortunately, in a lot of the cases, and when she hears her dad downstairs freaking out and, going through the motions because he's drinking and he's upset, she starts to blame herself. That the reason why he got out of control tonight is because I asked him that question about the restraining order. So she starts to really take it out on herself, which is another common trait. So she talks about reaching into her drawer and finding an old friend. The razor that had become so familiar with her body was here again to help me deal with the surroundings. Placed the razor on her upper left arm and let its cool edge soothe the pain in one smooth slice. I laid back, letting what felt like all the sadness start draining out of me and onto my bed sheets. The weed didn't work. It couldn't save me from the life around me. Somehow or another, it will always catch up to you and you cannot hide from it. With each trickle of blood slithering down my arm, I could feel the weight being lifted. I could feel the burden that was clutching my psyche start to drain from the open wound. The release was so overwhelming, satisfying, and unfortunately always seemed to do the trick. I never cut deep enough to kill myself, but enough to control the feelings I had inside. I could feel my mind becoming clear again. Complete relaxation rolled over me as if I had just smoked a cigarette after a big meal. I know there are healthy ways to deal, but this method was a surefire for now. I let go of everything bottled up in my mind. The complete focus on the pain I just inflicted drowned out everything from my surroundings. The emotional torment was no longer a factor for now, so I laid even further into my bed, but an uneasy feeling about my surroundings came abruptly back. There was not a single sound around me, and at this point something gave me a very unsettling feeling. I opened my eyes and sat up from my bed and panned the room. So the reason why I talked about that is because, that was my experience when I was self-harming when I was younger. You over-blame yourself and you take on the burden of problems that really don't even portray to you. And even if they do, it's not anything that you really can control. I mean, if you say something stupid or you make a mistake, you can't unsay it. You can't take it back. It is what it is. And sometimes, you think that it's best to do that because it takes away from the pain that's going on in your brain. But it's not a healthy coping mechanism whatsoever. But at the time, I wasn't going to get help or anything like that, so that was the way that I just dealt with it. I talked about it being on the upper left arm because that's where I always did it. It was just, I don't know, I guess that was just my spot. There's no exact reason other than, having nobody notice what was going on. So I wanted to put that in there. Now, she goes on to say that she sees the fan in her bedroom. It turns into this wicked-looking monster and stuff like that. And, it starts lashing out at her, so she, fights it off before she inevitably, runs out of her room and goes running down to Lake Lucky. So why did I make the fan a monster? Well, originally, this book was supposed to be made into a video game. I attended the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and I got my bachelor's degree, and it was going to be in video game design. Well, I did get it, but, I got with a group of people and some from the school and also a couple friends from here where I live, and we talked about making it into a video game. We had plans, we were coming up with concept art, we were going to put all of our different skills to use and stuff like that, and I was tasked with coming up with a story. And I had originally started coming up with the story, a couple years prior. I'd only maybe gotten a few chapters done. It didn't have shape. I didn't really know where I was going with it. But when we came up with that idea, when we graduated, I sat down and I started belting it out. And I knocked out, I want to say 70% of it in a very quick amount of time. It was my first book. I wasn't super familiar with, how many chapters I should do with it and doing different plot points. I was just using the knowledge that I had learned in college and stuff like that to kind of stretch it out and stuff. So, with that being said, it never came to fruition. We never actually got the video game up and running. We were supposed to be going to a conference out in Ohio. I forget exactly where. It was outside one of the universities, but it was called IDGAF. It was Indie Game something. We were going to go out there and we were going to pitch the idea and stuff like that, but what wound up happening was my ex and me started our custody battle, and she put a restraining order on me for some bogus shit, and it prevented me from leaving the state, so I had to ultimately give up that aspect of it, and, inevitably the whole thing started falling through because I was focusing all my time and energy on the custody battle itself, which wound up lasting 4 years. But in that time, I would work on it piece by piece and make the most of it. But one of the people that I was paired with, her name was Sam, she actually came up with the idea for the fan monster. And she actually drew it out, and she made it in a program called 3ds Max. And in 3ds Max, you could build, 3D modeling and stuff. So she had actually made it, and we were going to animate it and everything. So I kept that part in the book to pay homage to how the book really became shape anyway, because we were going to make it into a video game. So I kept that part in there. Now, Lake Lucky, which you'll hear about a few times in all different of the 3 books. And the reason is it was like the big hangout spot, where all the kids would go. They'd go on the rope swings, or they would barbecue out there. And since Reedville wasn't like a huge thing, like a huge place, you could go there, and like the parents were, within like a few miles of the place. So if they needed you, it's like the old school way. You'd see the lights come on, you'd go home. You know what I mean? So that was kind of like how I grew up. You knew you had to be home at a certain time, but you were mostly outside playing, with your friends and stuff. And it's unfortunate that a lot of that doesn't really happen anymore. But the lake was actually modeled after a lake called Culver's Lake here by where I'm from. It's about a 15-minute drive from here. And I had a friend that I grew up with, and he had a house on the lake, and he had a pontoon boat. So what we would do is we would go out there, we'd go on the pontoon boat, we'd, steal some like liquor from our parents or something like that, and we'd go out fishing, or we would just, drink on the lake where nobody could see us and get caught or anything like that. So it was like the big thing. And a lot of the times, you would go out there and you would meet like, women, whatever the case may be, on the beach or something. Hey, do you want to come on the pontoon boat? And, you were always trying to get lucky. So the name Lake Lucky came as an homage to what was going on when we were going to Culver's Lake. So, as we got older and stuff like that, we'd still do it. Like, you would look forward to summer going out, on the pontoon boat and stuff. So I wanted to make that like a big thing in the book, that's where like the kids would go and hang out. And although it's not really like super described in this book, because Stella's more of like a private person, when you get into the second book in a couple weeks, when we start doing that, you'll hear the main character in that book, Gwen, she'll describe it in more detail. And it pays even more homage to some of the memories I had on that lake and stuff. So that's where you're going to hear more about Lake Lucky in itself. So that's chapter 12. We got one more chapter for tonight that we were going to go through, and that's chapter 13. And chapter 13 is called Lake Lucky. And basically what happens is Stella encounters Patrick, because that's the noise she was hearing. And they have heavy dialogue between each other. They're talking about, her feelings towards him and how she thinks he's involved with her sister's death. And he has no idea. He's more like in his own head. And he's just like, all I wanted to do was just play football and stuff. Your sister was whacked. Like, I really didn't want anything to do with her. She just wouldn't get the hint. And no matter how many times I told her that I wasn't interested in her, or I kept telling her, like, to stop talking to me, she just kept pursuing and wasn't giving me personal space or boundaries. So that's why he said he did the restraining order. After them arguing back and forth, Stella winds up running into Whiteface. You see like they're in the woods, and the whole arena just gets like cleared. Whiteface comes in and just clears the whole thing. There's fire everywhere, and Whiteface actually picks up Patrick and just like snaps him like a twig. And then Stella winds up having dialogue with Whiteface until inevitably they fight, and then once Stella defeats Whiteface, they pass out. There is a huge, what's it called? There's a huge thing on here, and it's hard to talk about because, the third book is still being written right now, but there's a reason why Stella's seeing these monsters, and the way she's seeing them, and what they look like and stuff. And I can't really dive into it just yet, but there is a reason, I assure you, especially Whiteface. There's a reason why Whiteface looks the way that it looks. And when you get into book 3, it will all be explained, and it'll kind of just tie everything together. You're like, so that's why she was seeing like the Broken, or why she was seeing Whiteface or Bronze Angel, or any of the things that came up. It actually will be explained. Just to give a little teaser, Whiteface is actually somebody, and somebody actually did wind up killing Patrick, but you won't know until the third book comes out. Now, the thing I'm going to talk about is on page 124. After they go through their conversations and stuff like that, Whiteface is talking to Stella, and it kind of gives like a little nod to the little teaser I just gave, if you really think about it, if you're familiar with the books and think about it. So Whiteface starts off the dialogue and says, "You don't see how much you've grown, do you, my dear? You and I align with the darkness of your soul. Do you see it now? Can you feel the slither of fear becoming one with you as it trails throughout your body? You look at me now with the promise of bringing me pain, because this is how we love, and this is how we unite. Now we could be together forever and unleash the oppression burning within your heart." To which Stella responds, "You want me, motherfucker, then come get me." The monster began to howl and made its way towards me with the fire burning so hot that made a branch fall into the ring of fire near me. I ran over and picked it up and began to take swings at the face. Dodging countless blows, I beat it in the head several times before it fell over. The battered white face looked up at me with utter sorrow imprinted on its unusual face as I stood over it. The face suddenly began to cry tears of blood and said sorrowfully, "Believe in your anger, my love. It's the only thing that's left that's real. The glimmer of blood radiating off of you shines brighter than any star in the sky. You were made for this, and let my demise make a new way for you. All will be revealed, and you will know I am the way." The reason why I put that in there, like I said, when I'm finished writing the third book, all that will piece together. It will make absolutely so much sense on who that person is that she's seeing and why she's seeing them, because if you're paying attention in the book, before she starts seeing these things, she's taking that medication. So if you pick up on it, you know what I mean, you're going to see that it ties into it as to why she's having these delusions. Now, I put that in there as far as, all will be revealed and I will show you I'm the way. And the reason why I did that, that was actually a nod to one of my favorite horror movies, which is Hellraiser. If you remember from Hellraiser number 3, when he is standing in the church and after he blows out the windows, he goes, "I am the way." That's where I got that from. And that's where I made that nod, because that was one of the things that really interested me. When I was growing up, I got really into the Hellraiser movies. That's all I have for tonight as far as the hidden Easter eggs and stuff like that. We will be going into chapter 14, 15, 16. It's actually been a while since I've read this book. So I've been talking about Pete coming in, but Pete's coming next week. It's happening. We're talking about Pete. And like I said, outside of Stella, he is my absolute favorite character. When I talk about Stella, it's how I feel inside and stuff like that. But then when I get to talk about Pete, it brings such happiness to me because he's such a great character. And, he's littered throughout book 2, and book 3, he's actually a main role. So, it's good to be able to have that. And like I talked about the other week, I read chapter 2 to Stormy, and, even she agreed. It's a very happy, very, loving chapter. You get to see the relationship between Pete and Stella a lot more and see how deep that bond actually goes and, how they're molded together. And, a lot of it plays homage to, heritage, like being Italian and stuff like that. Especially in the second book, there's a lot of things about religion, and when we start diving into that, like I said, I think it's in about 2 or 3 weeks, we'll start diving into that one. That one's going to take a lot longer because it's literally double the size of this one. But there's a lot more detail. There's a lot more Easter eggs. There's a lot more things to talk about and, ways that I came up with this stuff, especially because it was only less than a year ago that I actually released it. So, it's more fresh on the mind. So, with that being said, I'm going to bring it to a close tonight. However, next Tuesday, we're going to be doing our healing. If you've never joined one of our healings before, I invite you to jump on, because next Tuesday, we're going to be talking about co-parenting. The ups and downs with it, creative methods to be able to successfully do so with someone, what it's like to co-parent with somebody who's actively involved as opposed to someone you're co-parenting with that's not so much involved, and then different things that parents tend to do, manipulation, things like that, how it affects the child. We're going to dive into it. And like I said, anybody that wants to join in and give their input, you can certainly message me and we could set that up for you to join us. I would love to have, people join in and talk about that with us, because there's so many different perspectives. Everybody has a different co-parenting situation. So, mine might be vastly different than, let's say, Stormy's, which I already know it is. But, you'll get the perspective from all the different angles with that. I think we're going to keep it to 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. Just it works out best with my schedule and stuff like that, because we tend to talk for a while and then I got to get up at 4:30 in the morning to go to work. So it helps me be able to download the video and stuff afterwards and then post it to our YouTube. If you want to see some of our previous things we've done, maybe you liked tonight's episode when we were talking about the book and you want to get caught up on what we were talking about, the what's it called? The YouTube page is called The Souls of Paradise. If you look at my TikTok profile, it's also right on the top where you can click it and it'll bring you right to all the videos. And you can get caught up on everything we've done so far. I usually have everything updated. Yes, Lana, I'm representing you. Yes. So you can get caught up with us and everything and see what's going on. So then next Thursday, like I said, we're going to do chapters 14, 15, 16. After that, we'll do 17, 18, 19, and then 20, 21. And then I'll bring us to the close on that book. We'll wrap it all together. I'll give you like what's going on, why it ended the way that it did, and where our next book is going to pick up. So again, if you haven't checked out anything we've done before, make sure you check out our YouTube and stuff like that, and you can see everything and get yourself caught up. With that being said, I will see you guys next Tuesday for our... No, I did not talk about you being smoky yet. That's not until book 2. But that's another Easter egg. So my daughter is hidden throughout the second book quite a bit. So she actually is the cover, too, on the soft cover. I took a picture of her letting go of a red balloon at my dad's house, and I thought that was a cool cover art. So you could check it out by going on the Amazon and looking up Paradise Reborn. You can certainly see that image. I thought it was very cool, and I thought it worked very well. I also have another image for the hardcover book because it's, it's another image that I really liked that I thought went very well with the story. But, I still wanted to pay tribute to my daughter, so I kept both. So, but they're both available. Like I said, if you haven't read the books yet, you can go on Amazon, and they are 99 cents for the Kindle versions. If you want the hardcover books and stuff like that, they're a little more because Amazon obviously charges for printing costs and such. So... But again, make sure you guys check out the stuff. I thank you all for joining us tonight, and I will see you again on Tuesday. And if you have any questions or anything, or if you want to join us, send me that direct message or store me, and we will get you guys in. All right? Have a good weekend.